Just standing here, one person with a hammer on the windshield. We see that man on the roof with a skateboard trying to just basically break anything off this car that they are able to do. And I don't know if we can pull out and see if any officers are in this area, but again, this situation has devolved into chaos when we have seen quite a bit of it this weekend play out in Los Angeles. And you start to see the smoke rising in this wide shot. It's a disturbing sight to see a fire burning like this in the midst of a crowd making their way through Los Angeles. Again, we just heard from LA Mayor, there's the explosion that we've been waiting for to see if it would happen. That car has now exploded as it likely is reaching the lithium battery that powers these electric cars. I think typically they're found on the, beneath the car, along the frame of those vehicles. And so once the fire reaches down there, it is very difficult to put these fires out. I think I remember a crash on a bridge recently where there was some kind of fuel or a vehicle that could not be put out, and they encased it and basically just dragged it off of the bridge. But here we have, some knuckleheads trying to continue to damage this car, do whatever they can to get involved in this, and basically a mob party as they watch this car burn. Yeah, and again, these EV fires, they're absolutely no joke. Those fumes that are in the air, again, these protesters, they're so close to that fire. They're breathing in all of the toxic gases. Again, we talked about carbon monoxide, hydrogen fluoride. Those aren't things that you should be breathing in, and they are just feet away from that car that exploded. And it makes you think, is that the plan for the second Waymo? I believe there's three, were there 3 or 5 Waymos?
5 of them,
5 Waymos. And it's just a terrifying thought to think that they want to light all 5 Waymos on fire. And looking at this crowd, you can see a few different flags within that crowd, and they continue to move. I believe this is Temple Street. Did we say this is Temple Street? I think this is happening on Los Angeles, just across the 101. Once the California Highway Patrol came in to clear the 101 freeway, the crowds kind of have scattered all across downtown Los Angeles. This we saw a large group. Oh, there's 2 cars on fire now. So they were able to light a second car. And we're going to see this play out here on both ends of this string of 5 Waymo cars still burning here.
And this is the group in Chinatown. Now, we have a few different scenes, so this is just one of the scenes. I'm curious what the other scenes look like at this time, if they've calmed down a little bit, or this is, because this is still a very large crowd. I mean, I've barely seen any improvement in the last few hours. So it looks like these protesters, they are not going anywhere, and it seems like this protest is dragging into the evening hours.
It will continue. It's fair to say the sun will be down long before this crowd breaks apart for the evening. Can we pan around and see if there's still a group at the federal building? I know our vantage point has kind of shifted here. We're on the west or south side of, we do have, this is Temple and Alameda. So this crowd is still gathered. Are they sitting down? I'm not sure. They are all
They look like they're sitting down.
Okay, so this is Temple and Alameda. They are here for the long haul, it looks like. Not really doing anything to provoke anything from these LAPD officers, but showing they are not planning to go anywhere. This says Aliso, so it's backed up a little bit. They have cleared the intersection of Temple and Alameda. Oh, this is on the backside. Gotcha. Okay, so this is the top of the hill. Here's the bottom of the hill. This is where the focal point of much of the unrest has been. This is Alameda and Temple down here. And there's still a small group here, but this is where we saw the large confrontation this morning as those cars continue to burn a few blocks away. There is the motorcycle that remains on scene. There was a time when there was a skirmish line, LAPD officers who had cleared the entrance to the federal building and pushed people down the hill into this intersection of Alameda and Temple. At that point, 2 people on motorcycles approached the skirmish line. And again, there's some, we're not sure whether they intentionally drove those bikes into the officers or whether they were just doing a U-turn or some kind of maneuver and lost control and hit the officers. Either way, they hit the officers. 2 of them suffering injuries. Both drivers have been taken into custody and will likely face several new charges in addition to just what the other protesters obstructing a federal or local authority once those officers were injured. And as we pan back over to Los Angeles Street, you can see the 101 freeway is now moving northbound. The southbound
So it seems
not
like
moving.
it's still closed. The southbound side is still closed, but northbound is open?
Yeah,
Is this what
southbound
we're
is
saying?
closed.
Okay.
We can see the officers, CHP still on the surface. Mike, what were you saying? Got it. Okay, so we have, again, on the right side of your screen, a live view from the ground from Los Angeles Street. That is what you're seeing right now at the top of your screen on the left from that aerial view from Air 7. So we have demonstrators spread out to at least 3 or 4 different locations. The largest group, I'd say, is over by the 101. I'm sure many of these people were the folks who were on the 101 freeway just a short time ago. They were slowly backed up the on-ramp by CHP officers and pushed up onto side streets, surface streets once again.
And then we saw...
yeah, was that a flashbang? Are officers moving into this area now? I just saw another explosion, and it looks like people might be moving out of here.
Hopefully, if they are moving in this area, they have their respirators on, because again, this is toxic gas, and there are just way too many people in this area. I remember a little bit earlier, we did talk about how many people have been charged with assault of a deadly weapon on officers. So many people have been facing that charge, and these numbers are just insane. And just seeing the large crowds of people, and they're still gathered here around the 5 Waymos, even though this one has exploded, but hoping an officer or someone is moving in to try to at least disperse this crowd, get them away from this Waymo that's now putting all that black smoke in the air.
I don't know if there's any way we can see if there are officers kind of gathering, getting ready to put this out, because the more that these cars are allowed to burn, and the longer this goes without police intervention, the more dangerous it becomes. That's the closest we can see, I think, is just 2 officers over on the far side of the 101. It is a dangerous situation for those officers to have to walk into an area like this. You know, things are volatile, and 2 cars are now burning. Okay, we do have Tim Caputo, Eyewitness News reporter who was in that press conference with LA Mayor Karen Bass, asked some very impressive questions. Before we get to the mayor, Tim, you are now on the ground. Can you tell us where you are and what you see?
Yeah, so we're essentially on Los Angeles Street. The interesting thing is on this side of the 101, Los Angeles kind of turns and goes to Alameda right at Union Station. A lot of the protests in the past have ended up on this because you're on either side of the 101. What you're looking at here you saw from above is the cars that are currently on fire. The police line is on the opposite side of these car fires at the moment from where we're standing. Part of the crowd have been moved back in this direction, but you see they're not exactly moving. They've essentially just moved the line back and are standing in place at this point. That thick black smoke obviously going right into the air where we're standing, and the crowd kind of mingling its way down. Tommy, if you want to point down the street towards Union Station as well, kind of working its way on Alameda and Los Angeles as well. They're essentially all in this area. The federal building itself, obviously the focus of these protests and these demonstrations, is on the other side of the 101, but as often happens with these rallies and protests and demonstrations that are in this general vicinity, they get on either side of the 101, and where this is kind of on the near side opposite where the federal building is itself. The crowd itself, by and large, a lot of bystanders taking video, holding up signs, kind of standing, and mostly onlookers. There are a handful, a number of agitators within that crowd. It doesn't necessarily reflect the whole of the group itself. You know, Jory, you were mentioning we were just up in the mayor's office a short time ago talking with the mayor about everything that's transpired over the last couple of days as well. Obviously, the mayor concerned about the violence that has erupted, but she is obviously taking the stance of saying that the Trump administration's immigration policies and these ICE raids that have happened in greater Los Angeles is the reason that there has been a kind of uprising and resistance from the people here in Los Angeles. Angelino's taking to the streets for 3 straight days now, and the crowd seems to be getting bigger as more and more people, some coming from the train station itself, are kind of descending on this area. You know, when we were in Compton yesterday, when they set that car on fire, it took a minute for the fire department to get there and put that car fire out. I can tell you from either angle from where we're standing, it would be nearly impossible to get a fire truck in, maybe from over here by Union Station, but obviously this is burning strong with people standing by, and that's why police have backed off a little bit at this point. Obviously, we're keeping a fairly safe distance away from the kind of strongest of the action. You hear the explosions as well from those cars. Obviously, people standing close by there, not necessarily a safe area to be. When we were parked just underneath City Hall by the mayor's office, the crowd rather was kind of moving their way up the street. They're all over this area, as I'm sure you've seen from Air 7, but obviously at this point, this is the main focus. The smoke could be seen from all around as these folks converging around this part of the rally at this point.
Yeah, Tim, now that we have you, I do want to ask you more about what the mayor said. You asked her about the violence and if she's blaming the rioters, the demonstrators who are turning to violence, but she led her press conference directly blaming what has played out and the unrest in our city on what the Trump administration has done, but also saying that if you're causing violence and you're attacking law enforcement, you are to blame as well. So it almost seemed like she was trying to have it both ways.
To a degree, right? So this is, it's nuanced and it's difficult, right? I mean, there was an awkward moment where she's talking about we wanted to...
The News Nation town hall that everyone is talking about.
This is outside her office in City Hall, literally outside the windows of the mayor's office. We're hearing these loud bangs as she's saying, folks, keep it peaceful. That point is come and gone. That is clear to this point. You see it behind me, obviously. The peaceful part of it is not happening. But here's the interesting juxtaposition, of course, because the protests and the demonstrations are against those federal agents, whether it's ICE, the FBI, Homeland Security, anyone federal agents assisting. LAPD, CHP, and the Sheriff's Department are all distancing themselves from the immigration operations that have been happening. But here's the interesting part and what makes it difficult. When there's violence against those federal officers, when there's graffiti on the street, cars on fire in the street, now it's in the hands of LAPD. Now it's in the hands of the Sheriff's Department. They can't sit idly by and let this happen. This is no longer setting a car on fire in the middle of the street about preventing an ICE raid from happening at a Home Depot in the Fashion District. So that's the awkward juxtaposition where I think the mayor is kind of playing both sides, but is also being responsive to the fact that while people are upset and they're emotional about what's happening with the federal government, with immigration from the Trump administration and the feds going to businesses and homes in Los Angeles, the LAPD, the Sheriff's Department, the CHP, all the local agencies are towing that fine line where they're saying, we're obviously not part of immigration and anything going on there, but we got to keep the peace on the streets in Los Angeles. And so it's tough because their presence alone is sometimes agitating the crowd. The police presence, the flashbangs, the tear gas, those are provoking the crowd to fire back. But it's tough because police are not part of immigration, but now they're part of these protests and these demonstrations. It's a nuanced issue that is playing out in the streets here in Los Angeles, and I think it's important to note folks are trying to be cognizant of the fact and the emotion that the people out here have, but also realizing setting cars on fire, throwing rocks at police officers, assaulting people on the street is not okay regardless of what your cause is.
It's a difficult job being mayor. You have a lot of constituencies to tend to. And as she did also say, the mayor said she's for everyone. She wants everyone to, she's not for one side or the other side or the other side. She wants everyone to be okay. She doesn't want to see violence, and she wants to see her citizens maintain their safety and comfort living in Los Angeles. It looks like from Air 7, Tim, I'm not sure you can even see, but it looks like at least 3 of those Waymos, 3 of the 5 have now been lit on fire. Do you see any police moving anywhere in this area?
No, I mean, from our vantage point, like I said, we're a little bit removed, right? We're not trying to get too close to that thick black smoke, but I don't see any police officers on this side of the 101. Of course, we're dipped down a little bit on the road here as it curves down into Alameda. I see a lot of bicycles and folks on the street and a lot of onlookers on this side, essentially watching it from this angle. I mean, look at this. There's a city bus driving by. I don't think there's any police anywhere close to this. Whether or not the fire department is coming and how quickly they're coming remains to be seen. They might let this burn out, but obviously in the middle of the street here, a raging fire, cars that were set on fire during these demonstrations. A sad sight to see, obviously, all around.
Yeah, indeed.
Tim, this is Niku. So you're out there and you're just like in the thick of it. The smoke is behind you. What does it smell like? I'm just really curious with all the fumes in the air. Does it have a distinct smell? What's it like?
You know, it's an interesting question, too, because on Friday night, especially when those tear gas was shot from the feds outside the federal building, that is a very distinct smell. You get it up your nose, it burns all the way through your nostrils and gets into your eyes as well. Some of those pepper spray balls that we felt in Compton as well, those are kind of quick bangs. You kind of get a little bit and then you move on your way. This smells like an open dumpster fire. I mean, for better or worse. We could smell it when we pulled up and walked up the street. The thick black smoke is kind of emanating. Thankfully, there's not much of a wind at this point, so it's going straight up in the air, but I think it's a true sense of what we're feeling here is that smoke is kind of emblematic of the frustration, this thick black smoke kind of billowing above these demonstrations. Everyone frustrated at this point, and just a cloud of uncertainty hovering over all of Los Angeles these last 3 days.
Yeah, I don't know how much you can tell. You're in one spot, kind of separated from everything. I'm just curious at this point whether things are truly escalating in downtown Los Angeles or just a group that splintered off happened to find 5 cars that they were able to light on fire, and it makes it look like it's a lot worse than the situation actually playing out of the ground.
It's a great point, Jory, because that's the quintessential question when you have rallies, demonstrations, riots, if you will. I wouldn't go far as to call it that. I know President Trump had tweeted about riots and looting. I don't know that I would characterize it that way. But certainly when you have groups like this, from what we've seen, Tommy, pan over here to the left here, it's the vast majority are people taking videos, people waving flags, people walking around, people wanting to be part of the cause, wanting to have their voices heard, and wanting to show the power of numbers and the power of force. Certainly Friday night when we were out here, it was 24, maybe 30 agitators throwing rocks, covered head to toe, trying to instigate the police officers and the feds who were there. The vast majority, that's another big explosion, huh? The vast majority of the folks here seem to be those who are walking around, and you have these pockets of people who are intentionally causing some issues. I'm pausing here for a second just to take a see if the police are moving up any closer. Obviously, the biggest concern anytime you have a car fire, but especially when you have a car fire surrounded by people standing around, is you have a gas tank full of gasoline, and a fire and explosion here would not be ideal. Some of those explosions, you know, it's interesting. We've gotten used to over the last day and a half to tell the difference between a fireworks like that or flashbang being fired by authorities. A subtle difference, and frankly doesn't really make a difference. Obviously one is sent by authorities and the other is fired by, that's another one that's a firework. But these are part of the crowd, intermittent, and a small part of the crowd. So it's tough to describe the crowd as a whole as agitators. I wouldn't even say that, even close to that. But because it only takes a handful of people to light a car on fire, a handful of people to throw fireworks into a line of police officers, a handful of people to vandalize vehicles, to vandalize and graffiti walls, those get the attention, and rightfully so. I mean, obviously you have a huge burning fire in the middle of the street here, but it doesn't seem like this is necessarily encompasses the vast majority of the people here. It's just everyone gets caught up in the hoopla as they wanted to come out and kind of have their voices heard.
Yeah, no doubt. It's a matter of a couple people kind of ruining things for everybody else. What might have been a peaceful demonstration certainly is
and again,
no longer that.
A crowd of protesters, they gathered outside of the federal detention center where we're near right now. They gathered outside of that on Friday. Police in riot gear used tear gas then, again, to stop the violent protesters. ICE Acting Director Todd Lyons called the situation appalling.
So we're in a major U.S. city, and we have law enforcement officers trapped, surrounded by over 1,000 protesters, and the LAPD would not respond to help those officers in their time of need. Over 2 hours it took for them to come get there.
Well, LAPD responded to that comment saying, quote, our personnel mobilized and acted as swiftly as conditions safely allow. But as you can see, things here on the ground still pretty chaotic. I mean, you can hear those flashbangs behind me. And President Trump was very clear that more needs to be done, sending the National Guard here. Now, California Governor Gavin Newsom claims the move, sending the National Guard, deploying them rather, was to cause a spectacle. That's what Governor Gavin Newsom called it. But President Trump says otherwise, writing on Truth Social, quote, if Governor Gavin Newsom of California and Mayor Karen Bass of Los Angeles can't do their jobs, which everyone knows they can't, then the federal government will step in and solve the problem. Riots and looters, the way it should be solved. The president also made this comment today. Take a listen.
Nobody's going to spit on our police officers. Nobody's going to spit on our military, which they do as a common thing. They get up to them this far away and then they start spitting in their face. That happens, they get hit very hard.
And also this afternoon, LAPD issued a tactical alert saying the use of less lethal munitions has been authorized by an incident commander. They said people were throwing items at officers. I witnessed that, people throwing bottles of fluid. I don't know what was in those bottles, but throwing them at officers. And LAPD saying an unlawful assembly has been declared. So that is the situation right now. You got these protesters here on the 101. You got them on the bridge. There's different points, different areas of downtown that are blocked off. You can hear those flashbangs behind me. It's unclear how long this is going to be going on. And also, I just want to reiterate, in terms of the people who were arrested during these immigration enforcement efforts, DHS, they did put out some details about this. They said, detailing about 11 of the people who were arrested, they called them the worst of the worst illegal criminal aliens. They're people from all over the world. We're talking about Ecuador, Peru, Mexico. And, those specific people, they say they have extensive criminal histories. And some of those crimes include sexual battery, abuse of a child, second-degree murder. So some serious crimes there. And those are the people that ICE agents are removing during their operations carrying out here in L.A. Back to you.
Christina, it's Alicia again. A question about this group that it seems to be growing on the 101 there with their signs. It's really delicate for law enforcement when they're in this situation because we know they're trying not to agitate them further, but they're also trying to keep in mind the safety of the drivers and the public in this area. How is it that, if you can see it at all, that law enforcement is approaching these particular protesters? Are they pushing them back? How are they doing this?
No, so they're not pushing them back. They're creating a line, a skirmish line, as I believe some of my law enforcement friends call it, and they're lining up beside each other and just creating a perimeter, protecting the property, protecting themselves, and they just they move forward and they're telling the crowd to get back, and that's how they're going about it. They're not going off on any of these protesters randomly. They are protecting themselves. They're in a line. They're moving together. This is a very, very coordinated effort. You can tell. You have LAPD again, declaring an unlawful assembly. You have some of those officers providing security or providing safety measures, blocking off some of these intersections where these protesters are going. And you can see they're trying to keep traffic moving smoothly. But I can tell you, even just getting here downtown, I had to get out of the car and talk to some of the officers and say, hey, we're not here to cause any problems. We're just trying to get to the location where the National Guard is positioned to report on this very ongoing and important situation right here now in LA County. But they were so careful, and that was hours ago, that they had this area blocked off, because they're trying to do what they can. They're trying to do their best to keep everybody safe.
Christina, it's Guy Benson, and the aerial shots that we now have on the screen, you can see there. You might not be able to see them, Christina, but we can. It looks like these rioters have now blocked off 4 lanes of traffic, an entire direction of traffic in one of these major thoroughfares, one of these major arteries. So that's a huge disruption. I want to come back to something that we played in the intro to the hour in one of our montages. Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey referred to what's been going on in Los Angeles over the last couple of days as, quote, peaceful protests. That's how he described them. Based on what you've seen on the ground, Christina, how would you address that characterization by Senator Booker?
I would characterize that as wrong. Throwing boulders and rocks at officers, that there's nothing peaceful about that. Shoving law enforcement, attacking ICE agents, there's nothing peaceful about that. Setting fires in the middle of the road, just running around, there's nothing peaceful about that. The vandalism, that's not peaceful. I mean, these are crimes that are being committed here, and like the Trump administration, like the officials say, the perpetrators, they're going to be held accountable. I mean, I already saw an FBI alert for a potential suspect behind assault, or who allegedly assaulted an officer. And again, this is LA. It's a big city. There's cameras everywhere. There's surveillance cameras everywhere. So even though you got a lot of protesters out here with their face covered with masks and whatnot, police are going to go through, authorities are going to go through all of this evidence. And then when they go through it, they're going to be able to identify identify a lot of these people who are happily, tagging up vehicles and attacking law enforcement, shoving people around. They're going to go through this evidence, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens from there. But that was a very long answer to a brief question. Cory Booker's assessment of this is wrong if he's calling it peaceful.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News.
You just stay with me. Our photographer Andy doing an incredible job. So we're walking together. I just want you to see. So it's turn around. You see this. You see law enforcement coming this way, and you can just focus on them. So this is what we've seen. You see different groups of officers coming down the street, doing what they can. You have again the National Guard here. A tactical incident alert was announced by. Okay, we're being told to move, so we're scooting aside, but we're going to keep the camera up because we just want you to see this is what has been going on all day, or actually for hours now, right? Officers doing what they can to try and protect the public. And a very fluid situation. There's at least 300 National Guardsmen in 3 different parts of LA right now. Again, the president said he's going to be deploying 2,000 troops, but we do know that hundreds are currently here trying to protect the property and the people. And we also got, I'm just going to be quiet a little bit. I'm not sure you guys can hear me over the sirens, but you have officers closing in on this intersection. This is where this has been going on for hours like that now. You have it's calm, things will be peaceful, and things will just pop off at a moment's notice. And that law enforcement, they'll converge and do what they can to try and keep people safe. I'm going to toss it back to you. My throat's a little dry.
Very active.
There's been, the tear spray.
Very active scene, Christina. I can tell you we've been following along with your coverage all afternoon. Great job for us there on the scene. Christina, if you're still there, we would love to ask you some questions about what you're observing there. I know that you've been exposed to some of the elements. I heard Christina earlier when she was covering some of the disruptions when some of these protests were turning violent, things were being thrown. You could hear Christina inhaling some of the what I suspect to be tear gas. What we're seeing right here appears to be some type of altercation between a protester and law enforcement.
Yeah, they just took someone down who had breached the police line. I've been watching these live pictures since we've been on the air, and we have seen a consistent series of projectiles being thrown at officers by these protesters, many of whom are flying foreign flags as they attack members of law enforcement. As Christina said, this has been going on for hours.
Christina, I do want to ask you a question if you're still with us, kind of jumping off of Guy's point here. We know, you made mention to all the various law enforcement there on the scene. We understand LAPD, I think the sheriff's deputies are there, and of course we know the National Guard and ICE. Can you give us a sense as to who is doing what there? Our understanding, or my understanding, is that National Guard is there to protect the ICE agents who are trying to perform their job. What more can you tell us about, kind of the role that law enforcement is playing there on the scene?
Right, so you have the National Guard. They're here to, ensure public safety. They're protecting the federal property, as you know, that's been defaced. There's lots of graffiti and whatnot on there since Friday. You have LAPD now. You can see their police presence. They're here, in the intersections offering support. They don't carry out civil immigration enforcement. They've reiterated that because, there's been a lot of protesters, calling on them to stop the immigration raids. And they said, we're not doing that, but they are offering support to the ICE agents and the people carrying out this, just trying to keep people safe. They're just trying to keep the peace. People are attacking the ICE agents. They're throwing bottles at them. They're throwing rocks and cement. We have video of that from yesterday and Paramount. They're setting cars on fire. That violence is something that they do not want here. The police do not want here, and so they're doing what they can to stop that. The sheriff's, the LA County Sheriff, he said that too. They're trying to do what they can to protect the public and keep people safe. And again, when we talk about I just want to talk a little bit about some of the arrests that were made. So DHS, they released information this afternoon about on 11 of the people who were arrested during ICE's operations during this week. And they described these people as some of the worst illegal criminal aliens. They're from all over the world. These 11 people. We're talking about Ecuador, I think Peru. They're saying that these people, their criminal histories include sexual battery, child abuse, second-degree murder. Those are the kinds of people that ICE have been getting off the streets during their immigration enforcement operations. And yet you have these protesters out here who are upset about it. They want everybody released. And again, the Trump administration reiterating that is not going to happen. But again, live look out here. It seems okay right now, but again, things can change in a moment's notice. Back to you.
Well, Christina, it's Guy Benson, and just for the viewers, it's almost impossible for our camera people to pan this crowd without showing some profanity that they've spray painted somewhere. So we apologize for that, but it is a reflection of who these people are with their foreign flags and their masks as they attack law enforcement officers live in broad daylight. Christina, my question to you is, this is how they're behaving now in broad daylight. What's the concern about after dusk when the sun goes down? Often the worst elements get more violent at night, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a great point. With lots of protests and demonstrations and riots, you have opportunists who don't even care about really what's going on. You see them running into stores and running out with jeans and things like that. We haven't seen that yet. Hopefully we don't. But that's definitely a criminal element that a lot of people are concerned about because, as you said, hundreds of people are out here. And you have people, waving around, Palestinian flags and just different things like that. You're like, what are you out here protesting? Either way, violence is not acceptable with these law enforcement agents, and we're just not sure what we could see tonight. This is the third day of this. Just before you guys came on live to me, there were rubber bullets being deployed. And interesting to note, when law enforcement takes action like that, some of these protesters or rioters, rather, they get fired up. They're like, "Let's go! Here's law enforcement, ready to go." It's like it's like they want to fight, and so that's definitely concerning, especially as it gets later in the evening.
Christina, it's Alicia, and just one thing, we hope that you and Andy Anderson are staying safe. Andy, folks should know, is a fantastic Fox News photographer out there, one of the best we have. But what I'm curious about is when you were giving us your report earlier and you had the federal building behind you, and then all of a sudden you guys had to turn because there was activity behind you. Is there a sense that there are protesters and people coming in from all sides?
Yeah, I mean, who knows where some of these people are coming from? I mean, it's just, I mean, it literally, like, here's it here.
Right there.
I mean, you see a guy getting arrested right there, and I mean, he looks almost happy about it. I mean, this is what we're seeing. I mean, people out here happily tagging up, spraying, graffitiing up a car. I mean, they were over there doing that to a Waymo vehicle, and I'm sorry you had to, see the curse word written on it. But I mean, they were happily doing that. They have their face masks on, they're all covered up, committing vandalism. And what does that do to support anyone's efforts? I mean, they say they're out here and, trying to protect, the fight for their freedoms and the release of some of these people who have been arrested or detained. But when you're out here attacking law enforcement and tagging vehicles, I mean, really doesn't do any good for your cause. I would say that for sure. Back to you.
Hey, Christina, it's Joe Concha. Guy's point earlier around possible curfews that may take place, because if this is broad daylight, you can only imagine what's going to happen at night. We all saw what happened during 1992 and the riots that happened there in Watts and Los Angeles. What are we hearing now from California's leaders as far as Gavin Newsom or Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, Adam Schiff, Senator, California, Kamala Harris, former, obviously, the Democratic nominee in 2028. This is her hometown. Are we hearing anything from leaders there trying to quell this and say, go home?
Well, Karen Bass did put out a statement. I can't remember all of it, but she was condemning the violence and saying they're not going to stand for it here. But it feels a little late considering that this stuff was breaking out on Friday night. when she was condemning the immigration enforcement instead of the people who are actually attacking law enforcement. So it seems a little late. Governor Gavin Newsom, I'm reading my phone now, he tweeted, Trump is trying to manufacture a crisis in LA County, deploying troops not for order, but to create chaos. Don't take the bait, never use violence or harm law enforcement. Yeah, Trump is manufacturing this crisis. Trump is asking people to come out here. Yeah, right. Obviously not true. This is what needs to be said is that these people, they need to go home. The people who are attacking law enforcement, the people who are committing vandalism, just causing absolute chaos. This does no good for the community. And that's, I mean, that's just the bottom line.
Anti-ICE protesters clashing with National Guard troops outside of the Los Angeles Metropolitan Detention Center. Troops deploying flash bombs at protesters as they are pushing them back further. That standoff ongoing. And right now, News Nation correspondent Mills Hayes is on the ground in Los Angeles in front of the federal building. And Mills, you've been tracking the protests all day long. What is happening where you are now?
Hey, Natasha, well, behind us, you can see that there's a police line as well as vehicles that are right here. They are carrying those guns, those 40-millimeter guns that either have foam or rubber bullets. But they have actually told all of these people to disperse. We heard the LAPD helicopter come over here telling people to get out of the area. This has already been designated an unlawful area. In fact, we've seen some protesters throw things at police, including these rocks right here. We've seen rocks like this be thrown at these officers. And so in response, we've also seen officers fire back with this is a foam bullet, and then we've also seen them with the rubber bullets as well. And so those are pretty much scattered throughout. Let me guys show you over here as well, because this is really just massive destruction left behind right there from the protests. A lot of just leftover water bottles as well, but these are canisters that were holding some of those bullets as well. But take a look over here behind us. You can see that some people have been arrested behind us as well. LAPD making sure that they're staying there, but we also have seen those protesters over here kind of remain close to police officers, and we know that police is trying to get them to move out. We've been pushed back as well, but also want to show you guys over here, because where that federal building is actually over there where that blue car is at. So we're farther, about a block away. And then on the other block behind all of those police cars, that's where the freeway is. And that's where there are hundreds of more protesters that are right there. So LAPD.
Okay, so joining us now is Jonathan Fahey, former acting ICE director and former federal prosecutor. Thank you, sir, so much for joining us. First, I just want to get your thoughts on the response right now that we're seeing in Los Angeles. Folks in cars trying to get through on the 101 being stopped by protesters or rioters, depending on who the person is.
Yeah, what is happening here is really awful, and I think what makes it so awful is the conduct of both Gavin Newsom and Mayor Bass on this, because they are taking the side of rioters, as you know, sort of bringing us back to 2020 BLM, and they're putting the public safety secondary to their political agenda, which is open borders. It is so shameful, and I think President Trump earlier talked about sort of the incompetence of Mayor Bass and Gavin Newsom, but it's so much worse than this. This is malevolence. They are not even trying to stop this. They're speaking out on behalf of the protesters and not supporting these officers that are simply doing their job. And I think one thing that's important to note, just because Joe Biden and Alejandro Mayorkas refused to enforce immigration laws, that was their responsibility. Donald Trump is doing what he is required to do. It's not just simply a political decision. It's a requirement of his job. And this is so shameful. This shouldn't even be happening, but there is no support from the state and local, not the law enforcement, because I'm sure they're in line, but the state and local officials are not supporting federal law enforcement, and people are in danger because of it.
Jonathan, Guy Benson here. You used to direct ICE. You were the acting director of that agency, so you know what this work looks like and what it's supposed to be. Describe what ICE agents have been up to in this area of Southern California.
switch gears here really quickly as we're hearing from LA Mayor Karen Bass as anti-ICE protesters clash with law enforcement. Let's listen into this here on Live Now.
About this is about another agenda. It's not about public safety. There's clearly no plan, and there is clearly no policy. I want the people of Los Angeles to know that we stand with all Angelenos, no matter where you were born. The First Amendment right gives you the ability, again, to protest peacefully, but it does not give you the right to be violent, to create chaos, or to vandalize property, and that will not be tolerated. So I call on all Angelenos to continue expressing your right, your anger, your outrage, but to do it peacefully. And I just have to say that all of you were there Friday. Everybody knows what happened Friday. A workplace, several workplaces were targeted and raids took place. Now, in the beginning, the administration said they were just looking for dangerous felons, violent people. It's hard to say that that's what they found at a workplace or in a Home Depot parking lot. When this happens, it terrifies people. It sends a sense of fear and chaos in our city. And you well remember a few years ago in the last administration that kids were afraid to go to school. Parents were afraid to go to work. This impacts all of our city. You can't terrify the workforce, and then expect for people to get the jobs done. So if you think about a father that went into a factory and now his family doesn't know where he is, the detainees have not been allowed to speak to legal counsel. That is a marked departure from what has happened in the past. When you think of a mother that might be working in a household, taking care of children on another side of town, that impacts that family as well as her family. And so this is something that I think should not be happening in our city. And I join with the governor in appealing to the administration to rescind the order to federalize the National Guard and allow the National Guard to come back under the control of the governor. So with that, we can open it up for questions. Yes.
We're going to start with Lolita and then we'll go to Chase.
Mayor, these protests that were demonstrations, I should say, did start out peacefully. You've been here since in the morning.
Right.
But then they scattered and people were moving around. Where is the LAPD in terms of being here to be able to deal with that and maybe stop them before they get over?
Sure. Well, I think that basically they were overrun. But what is happening now is that the freeway is cleared. The California Highway Patrol, as you know, is in charge of the freeways. So they have moved all of the protesters back. They still might be there, but they are beginning to be dispersed. But LAPD is on the perimeter, so LAP is actively involved. You know that there were hundreds of protesters on the freeway and thousands of protesters off the freeway. So there is a joint collaboration going with the CHP, the LAPD, and then frankly the National Guard. But you also know that the National Guard is deployed to protect federal property. So there is a National Guard troops in Westwood at the federal building and also here downtown.
Next question, Chase.
Mayor Bass, have you reached out directly to the federal government, or is this you doing so right now with the media here? Have you tried to reach out?
No, my disappointment is I've been talking to the federal government for days. I was hoping to prevent this situation from happening. I was trying to encourage the administration that if they deployed the National Guard in Los Angeles, it would create a sense of chaos. It's the last thing our city needs. Our city is still trying to recover from the wildfires. And you just think about how so many people were impacted by that. And that's an example of where the administration was helpful. And to go from that situation to where we are now is just really tragic. And I think it's so unfortunate. It's the last thing Los Angeles needs.
When you say you reached out to the federal government, have you reached to President Trump?
No, I did not reach out to President Trump directly. I spoke to his chief of staff. I talked to Tom Holman. I talked to the U.S. Attorney. So I've talked to several members of the administration.
Next question, Matthew.
Yeah, I know you've been watching these protests. First off, what do you see when you're watching this? And I know that you've mentioned being worried about the safety of the protesters, but are you also worried about members of law enforcement in the middle of this?
Well, I'm worried about everybody. I'm worried about members of law enforcement. I'm worried about the safety of the people who are peacefully protesting. I'm worried about the businesses that might get vandalized. I'm worried about the vandalism that took place around the federal building. All of that. We do not need to see our city torn apart. And the idea that the federal government that should be assisting us is a contributing factor, I think is very tragic. When I see the protesters, I know that so many people are affected by this. Their families are affected by this. People are terrified.
How do you think that vandalism impacts the overall message of the protests?
Well, I mean, I first of all, I think protests need to be peaceful, period. And anytime it deteriorates into violence, that is a problem, and it absolutely messes with the overall message.
Next question right here in white.
Yeah, hi, Mayor. George Reuters. My question is, can you share a little bit about the conversations you've had with the governor, and how long you expect for the National Guard to actually be in?
You know what? Thanks for asking me that, because we're hearing all of sorts of information. We're hearing that the raids could continue. We're hearing that the National Guard is going to be here. So it's uncertain. But that's exactly the problem, because we don't need in this city to go to sleep tonight and wake up in the morning and find out about people running through Home Depot parking lots being chased by ICE officers, or people going to work, or children at school. So we don't need any of that in our city right now. Our city's trying to heal. Our city is trying to rebuild. Our city does not need to be torn apart with a provocative measure from the federal government.
We're going to go right here, and then we'll go right here.
If people get violent, if people break the law, they will be subject to arrest and they will be held accountable. It's as simple as that. So peaceful protest is what is needed. Peaceful protest is a part of our American tradition.
Right here. Mayor, last night the U.S. Attorney seemed resolute that he's ready to continue regardless of what's happened over the last 2 or 3 days. In your conversation with him, has there been any kind of attempted compromise or sort of kind of lowering the temperature, at least till things cool off locally if they want to continue, or are they just going to
Well, I mean, I think what we see now is they're doing
that. Breaking news is in Los Angeles, where people continue to protest for a third straight day. This is in response to a series of ICE raids in the city, and now also in opposition to the National Guard being called up to stop the protests. This video shows agents firing pellets at a crowd trying to push them back. The protests have been peaceful so far, but now, as you can see, protesters are being met with the National Guard as well as local law enforcement. Thank you for joining us here for our News at 5. I'm Edie Lambert. President Donald Trump has ordered 2,000 National Guard troops to be deployed to Los Angeles. This is unusual. It appears to be the first time in decades that a state's National Guard has been activated without a request from its governor. We do know about 300 National Guard troops were deployed today to 3 separate locations in the Los Angeles area. This video shows troops in tactical gear and holding long guns in front of armored vehicles at the Metropolitan Detention Center in downtown LA. And now to this video, which shows National Guard troops out on the streets of Los Angeles. Governor Newsom is fighting this massive show of force. His legal affairs secretary formally requested the Trump administration to rescind what they call the unlawful deployment of troops in LA County and return California National Guard members to the governor's command. In a letter to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, he said in part, quote, "There is currently no need for the National Guard to be deployed in Los Angeles, and to do so in this unlawful manner and for such a lengthy period is a serious breach of state sovereignty that's..."
From Pacoima, probably about, what do you think, George? Probably about 25 minutes ago or so, and these things were already pretty well involved then. So you can see they're pretty well consumed now, burnt down to the roadway by all indications, as you can see right there. And again, just putting up a lot of smoke in this area.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of smoke, but you were also talking about how dangerous it is, you and Jonathan, and you were saying it could even explode and send shrapnel nearby. So I'm just wondering, are there people right there? Can you even tell there's so much smoke?
Yeah, there are people that unfortunately have absolutely no idea what they're looking at. They're completely oblivious to what the potential is here with these lithium-ion batteries and so forth, and they're riding their bikes, let's post up right there, George, if we can. Let's not move anymore. They're completely oblivious to what could be happening here, and walking in between, riding their skateboards, riding their bikes in between. We'll try and get back on the other side here so we can get a better shot of that now that the smoke has kind of obscured our view. But you can see this one vehicle right here now completely down to the ground, and not going to be much left here, guys.
Yeah, this is all happening right near Olvera Street, the heart of Los Angeles, the origin of Los Angeles, and just an unfortunate sight. A lot of historical buildings there being threatened by these fires potentially as well.
To my command. In his statement, he says, indeed, the decision to deploy the National Guard without appropriate training or
Tonight, starting with our Steve Patterson on the ground near those demonstrations.
Ali, just moments ago, Governor Newsom asked the Trump administration to officially rescind the order to federalize the National Guard on the ground. Meanwhile, this rally continues to pop up, LAPD declaring it unlawful, and they're making arrests.
Tonight, protesters and law enforcement officials squaring off after days of raids, riots, and demonstrations. And a rare move by President Trump, mobilizing 2,000 California National Guard troops against the will of the state's governor. Overnight, another major flashpoint in front of the federal detention center where undocumented immigrants captured by ICE are being held. In nearby Compton, chaos. Protests there dissolving into lawlessness, demonstrators upending roadblocks, setting off fireworks, while a small group of looters broke into a gas station. These protests followed a day of skirmishes between authorities and protesters outside of a Home Depot. Law enforcement firing tear gas and non-lethal rounds into several crowds.
I couldn't see who was shooting, but they were trying to aim right at me, which is like it's very scary.
Sheriff Robert Luna saying his deputies only acted as peacekeepers and didn't assist with any federal action.
We will protect your right to peacefully protest, but we cannot and will not tolerate violence or destruction of property.
Today, Governor Gavin Newsom accused President Trump of attempting to manufacture a crisis by mobilizing the National Guard, adding he's hoping for chaos so he can justify more crackdowns, more fear, more control. Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, defended the move to NBC's Jacob Soboroff and says about 150 undocumented immigrants have been detained in the last few days.
But not just to protect the law enforcement, to protect the general public. If Democratic leaders want to turn their back on public safety, they can.
Tonight, tensions reaching a boiling point as more troops hit the ground.
Our Steve Patterson reporting in Los Angeles. And here in Washington and beyond, new concern from critics over the president's tactics with this federal deployment. Our Gabe Gutierrez reports.
With the National Guard troops now on the ground in L.A., tonight President Trump is defending their deployment.
Well, we're going to have troops everywhere. We're not going to let this happen to our country. We're not going to let our country be torn apart.
The president calling Governor Gavin Newsom and Mayor Karen Bass incompetent, while Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth says that active duty Marines at Camp Pendleton are on high alert and could be mobilized if the violence continues.
One of our core principles is maintaining peace through strength. We do that on foreign affairs and domestic affairs as well. I don't think that's heavy-handed.
Late today, on his way to Camp David, the president saying he personally spoke with Governor Newsom days ago by phone and threatened to send in the troops once he saw demonstrators throwing objects and spitting on officers.
They spit, we hit. And I told them, nobody's nobody's going to spit on our police officers. Nobody's going to spit on our military.
Democrats slamming the deployment, arguing troops are an unnecessary escalation.
For the president to do this when it wasn't requested, breaking with generations of tradition, is only going to incite the situation and make things worse.
This is the first time since 1965 in Alabama, the civil rights era, that a president has activated a state's National Guard force without a request from that state's governor.
We'll send whatever we need to make sure there's law and order.
Gabe Gutierrez is joining us now. And Gabe, the president is not ruling out invoking something called the Insurrection Act. It's rarely used, which would take all of this a step further.
Yes, Hallie, the Insurrection Act is an 18th century wartime law that authorizes the president to deploy military forces inside the U.S. during times of rebellion. He has not invoked it yet. Instead, he's using another statute that allows the president to federalize the National Guard under certain circumstances. Still, there are many legal questions swirling around all of this, Hallie.
We do want to bring in our panel. We have Republican strategist Jeanette Hoffman tonight and Chris Hahn, News Nation political contributor and host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast. Welcome, both of you. A lot to talk about. And Jeanette, why don't we start with you? Was calling in the National Guard essentially over Newsom's head the right move for President Trump to make?
Well, I think it was. I think President Trump looks to cooperate first with LA Mayor Karen Bass and then with Governor Newsom, but they didn't respond in time. I think what you're seeing on the screen, I don't know how anyone can categorize that as a peaceful protest. The LAPD was called in, didn't respond for hours. ICE agents, their lives were at risk. This has put a lot of people in danger here. And I think no one wants a repeat of 2020, the George Floyd riots, where cities burned. The city of Minneapolis was on fire for 2 days before Governor Tim Walz called in the National Guard to take control of the city. So unfortunately, I think it was the right call here. And I think our political leaders, Democrats and Republicans, owe our federal law enforcement the right to say we need peaceful protest, not what we're seeing here, not things like death to ICE and calling for the death of law enforcement agents. It's frankly unfortunate and it's frightening to me.
Chris, what is your take here? I mean, we hear Gavin Newsom and, the LA mayor basically echoing that this is for spectacle. And this is the first time since 1992 the National Guard was federalized. What type of message is Trump trying to send with this move?
I mean, he's trying to send the message that he's a strong man. That's exactly what he's doing here. There's a reason why the National Guard doesn't get federalized without the request of the states in this country. Look, we weren't alive during Kent State, but we've all understood what happened there. And God forbid one of these soldiers that Trump sent there takes the life of a protester, a peaceful protester. Look, I get it. There are some people in that crowd who are definitely not peaceful protesters. That's very plain to see. But the city of Los Angeles had it pretty well contained last night. And now the protests have grown in response to Trump. Politically in this country, there is going to be a reckoning for what is going on here. And it is going to be a massive reckoning against Trump and anyone who has stood with Trump during this. Because calling out the National Guard on your own as president into an American city is not something Americans do.
I mean, Jeanette, Democratic and progressive lawmakers are sounding the alarm over the activation. We see Senator Bernie Sanders saying this is another step in the wrong direction. I believe we have that sound. Let's play that quickly.
We have a president who is moving this country rapidly into authoritarianism. This guy wants all of the power. He does not believe in the Constitution. He does not believe in the rule of law. My understanding is that the governor of California, the mayor of the city of Los Angeles, did not request the National Guard, but he thinks he has a right to do anything he wants.
And we have the response to that later in the day, President Trump responding to a question about sending in troops despite not invoking the Insurrection Act. Let's take a listen to that.
Well, we're going to have troops everywhere. We're not going to let this happen to our country. We're not going to let our country be torn apart like it was under Biden.
So, Jeanette, any credence to Sanders' claims?
Well, listen, I think President Trump doesn't want to put ICE agents in danger, and that's exactly what is happening here. And I think Democrats have a lot of responsibility for that at the congressional level, at the state level, at the local level. You hear them likening ICE agents to Nazis, to the KKK.
Sure
you hear Hakeem Jeffries threatening to dox them. So I think Democrats are throwing more fuel to the fire, and they're weaponizing their rhetoric against ICE agents, and that's why you're seeing people
all gravitated to this area, but. Again, we're trying to get to the other side here so we can see the activity. George, I'm getting heat here. So we can see the activity. What's going on horseback there?
Yeah, this is actually, I believe, on Spring Street and Temple, Roland, there, right in front of Gloria Molina Grand Park, right where it meets LA's iconic City Hall. And this is just an unfortunate scene that we're continuing to see play out. Is this just one faction, or is this the same group of people we saw over the freeway? I mean, it seems to have just scattered all over the place now.
Yeah, I stand corrected. I'm sorry. We're moving around so much. I stand corrected. Yeah, Spring Street and Temple. Unclear whether or not this is the same group of people who are on the freeway. We've got people all over the place here, and activity all over the place taking place. It's not quite clear exactly what the objective is as far as LAPD pushing the people away from this intersection. Short of just standing there, there does not appear to be any real activity. They just appear.
Well, right now it's still daylight, so I'm thinking that it could potentially, I mean, what we're seeing now is a huge startup for when the sun goes down, when activity really kicks off. My FBI brethren, Bobby Chacon, said just a little while ago, he used a perfect term, that the mayor poured fire on this, and that is exactly what we're seeing. And this fire right here, LA has to remember, it almost burnt down just a few months ago. And when we start to see this type of actions, it is no longer a peaceful protest. It doesn't matter that some people stand around. The reality is this has gone from a protest to a riot, and it's actually been that way for about 3 days now. And this is the perfect example of where the National Guard could be used. Usually they're a buffer or a blocking force as an augment to law enforcement. But when we get to this point, this is exactly why President Trump pushed and activated the National Guard in that area. And even the mayor said that this is how incompetent she is. She said that she knew they were being activated, but she didn't think that they would actually be on the street. So I don't know what she thinks, but this is exactly why. That incompetence, these rioters, equal the National Guard being called up, and if the mayor wasn't going to do it, the governor wasn't going to do it, then the president did the right thing. And this is why citizens should not have to deal with this kind of nonsense. That I will say this, if we look at this historically over the past decade, this is not about Mexicans being deported. This is about the left organized. And
it is now 6:30 on this Sunday evening. We are following the ongoing demonstrations and protests in response to federal immigration actions in the city and county of Los Angeles over the last several days. We want to bring in our investigative reporter, Eric Leonard, who's been giving us a perspective of what law enforcement is set to do here. And Eric, you know, I keep thinking back to the last several days as the sun is beginning to set here shortly. This is unfortunately when we tend to see the most violence. Most of the protesters who are peaceful, they tend to get out of the way here. They tend to go home, and what's left are these agitators, usually, who aren't afraid to clash with officers there on the ground. And this is when we start to see the vandalism and other incidents.
Yeah, we have seen that the last few nights, not necessarily as the result of one of these more organized demonstrations at some of the locations around downtown LA. Incidentally, Grand Park there, which is the park directly adjacent to the criminal courts building across the street from LA City Hall, I believe that was one of the locations where there was supposed to be a planned rally this afternoon. So as we've been speaking throughout our live coverage this afternoon, speculating about what it is the LAPD was trying to do as far as the crowd control control in the downtown area. Perhaps what we're seeing now is what was ultimately intended, which was to push folks out of the area of that federal building complex where there's been so much tension and friction, not only between demonstrators and a fraction of those demonstrators and local police, but also with the federal agents who've been guarding the federal complex, particularly the detention center down there, and move all of these demonstrators back towards Grand Park, which is, again, where there was supposed to be a planned demonstration this evening. We're seeing the LAPD use members of its mounted unit, which are part of the Metropolitan Division. Again, this is a group that do a lot of crowd control training. And Kathy, as you were mentioning a minute ago, the typical horse will, of course, be terrified to run through a crowd or to hear loud noises, let alone explosions, gunshots. They work with these horses in these crowd control scenarios quite a bit. And the advantage is not only for the officers being up high, but can't really walk past a horse. So they're able to use them to push people one direction or another without having to engage in any kind of more hand-to-hand type of interactions, which certainly could lead to more friction. It's interesting that we're seeing the crowd there being pushed back towards Grand Park in downtown LA. Again, as we've been covering this afternoon, when the LAPD has dealt with crowd control issues, one of the key things is that they provide an avenue for people to leave. If you're telling people that it's an unlawful assembly and they've got to go home, you've got to give clear instructions, and there has to be a clear path for people to leave before anyone is subject to an arrest. It certainly looked like, at least in the preliminary images we had of those folks being pushed by the officers on horseback, that there was some friction going back and forth. It looked like things were being thrown at the police. It looked like the police may have fired some of those less lethal rounds towards the crowd, but our perspective's been a little bit difficult. There's lots of high buildings in downtown LA, and as Roland Spruill in News Chopper 4 was pointing out, the sun is coming from a direction that makes it difficult to see into some of the shadow areas as clearly as we would like. Jonathan, as you were discussing, that sometimes these things take on an added level of aggressiveness after dark, that could also be a reason why we're seeing officers begin to try to take some action now to try to begin to move people out of the area where they've had that friction the last few nights. Back to you guys.
Do we expect for events to be canceled tonight, whatever they might have had planned, to say, no, we're not going to do this, just we want everyone to go home at this point?
You guys in our newsroom might have a bit of better information than I did. My understanding early today was that there were a number of organized events. One of them was out towards Boyle Heights. Another one was definitely set for Grand Park there in downtown LA. It looks like none of that has happened with all of the events over the last couple of hours. But at least Grand Park is a big open space. If people want to hold a demonstration and a rally, that's the kind of place that would be a great spot to do it. One of the things I've noticed in our live pictures is that there's a lot of pink chairs in the middle of the road. There at the Grand Park, there's a bit of a, I don't know if it's a cafeteria or a snack bar. There's a coffee shop, and that's where those pink chairs probably came from. It's hard to say what the intention of the LAPD is at this point, other than to push people away from the federal complex. That's been the flashpoint for a lot of this the last few nights.
You were talking, Eric, about Eric, you were talking earlier about how, legally speaking, they have to push protesters. They can't corner them, per se. Grand Park, as you mentioned earlier, would be the perfect place to kind of push them into, given it's such a large space that covers several LA city blocks. But at this point, it looks like they're almost building a wall of sorts with those pink chairs, with other barriers, and then little things they have up there. And you just wonder, what officers are going to do at this point. They seem to be keeping their distance at this point, but this can't last all night. Even Mayor Bass has said these people should go home. They're interfering with the normal operations of the city of Los Angeles, and this has been deemed unlawful.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If they're building some kind of a barricade in the street there, which, as I'm watching some more of these pink fixtures being carried out, and there's the plastic street barricades, there's got to be a lot of concern because City Hall is right there, after all, for the security of City Hall and those buildings around. The building on the opposite corner from where they are, as we go to the north or east, is 312 North Spring Street. That's the old federal courthouse, but that's still where the U.S. Attorney's Office, federal prosecutors are. There's a number of federal offices. I believe even the U.S. Marshal may still have an office in that building. There's going to be concern for that. And what we were talking about earlier, you were just describing about that, how they have to leave demonstrators a way out if a demonstration is deemed unlawful and they're going to order people to leave. The legal term of that is kettling. They're not allowed to kettle demonstrators, meaning corral them into a space where there's no place they can leave voluntarily. Sure seems like there's a lot of places people can go, and the folks that are choosing to stay behind look like they're digging in, for lack of a better term, ready to have some sort of a confrontation with law enforcement should officers decide or be ordered to turn down that street and clear Spring Street between City Hall and the Criminal Courts building.
They are definitely building a barricade. We're definitely seeing them carry different material up there. We've seen the chairs that you're talking about. We've seen street barricades, and they're all going to this one place. They're setting them up right there. So they are definitely hunkering down. And I'm trying to remember another protest, how police have made their way past the barricades. I know we've watched it before, but I don't completely remember how they get around this, how they get past barricade situations like this.
I mean, I guess, Eric, we could see a situation in which they used less than lethal force here.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of what that's for. I think the most recent example that all of us watched were some of those demonstrations on the college campuses in the last couple of years, where we saw encampments being built. There was plywood walls that were being constructed, and at some point, the University of California made the decision that everybody had to go, as far as the one at UCLA. Similar situation happened at USC, and they'll use whatever means they can to encourage people to leave. Police like to call them chemical irritants. We casually refer to it as tear gas or pepper spray or pepper balls, stuff that makes your skin burn and your eyes burn. Those tend to be very encouraging in getting people to leave, other than maybe people who have really dug in. Sometimes even we see demonstrators who've brought gas masks or scarves. Sometimes they've brought buckets of water with like bandanas around them, because that's one way to prevent or at least wash away some of the effects of the irritants, depending on which ones are used. But as far as building a barricade in the middle of the street, I mean, this is the kind of thing that they're not I just can't imagine a situation where the local law enforcement would just allow this to remain and build up overnight. This is the sort of thing that they're going to have to address at some point, and it is a complicated thing. The more stuff that gets piled in there, the more difficult it becomes. But we just watched what happened on the 101 freeway when you had hundreds of people out there in the middle of the roadways blocking the on-ramp to the 101 freeway, people on the overpass above, and it took, what was it, maybe a few dozen CHP officers, an overwhelming amount of force to push everybody off the freeway and back onto Surface Street. So it can be done. Unfortunately, whenever you have to go, I shouldn't say you, whenever law enforcement goes hands-on with people, especially in a crowd like this where there's most people involved are probably out there just chanting, carrying signs. They may not go along with what law enforcement says, but they're probably not going to put up any kind of a fight. The problem is when officers begin to put their hands on those people, the tendency is that things get ugly. People get dragged around. People get hurt. Certainly the LAPD wants no part of that. But if a situation like this shows up, just like the mayor was describing earlier, outside the realm of a simple, peaceful demonstration,
yeah, thank you so much for having me. So directly behind me, we're actually sitting on the overpass of the 101 southbound, and as you can see, protesters behind, they're kind of surrounded the overpass. And what we've been witnessing in the last couple of minutes is that we're going to go ahead and bring the camera. We have been seeing protesters launch items to include water bottles and anything else they can at the police officers that are directly below them. And so this is obviously very dangerous. It is raising tension with local PD. As you can see, there are hundreds. I've been covering protests for close to 8 years now. This is one of the largest. This reminds me of George Floyd-style numbers of protests. And what the cameraman do is a standoff right currently.
The just blocking out. Some of them are going back and forth. We heard some flashbangs there. Law enforcement trying to get this under control as much as they can. It has been very chaotic down here downtown LA near the federal building all afternoon. You've had tear gas dispersed, rubber bullets deployed, the flashbangs, all to try and protect the property and to protect the people here from some of these anti-ICE protesters who are just causing chaos. Take a look at this video. Tear gas was used to disperse a crowd as some protesters threw back those tear gas canisters. This was yesterday in Paramount, a city in southeast LA County. Fox News correspondent Bill Malusian reports that DHS has an office in Paramount that they're using for a staging location, and protesters found it and gathered in that area. And in addition to all of the violence, some anti-ICE protesters were shouting on loudspeakers at officers. This is what they've been dealing with. Take a listen.
ICE out of Paramount, we see you for what you are, ICE, a terrorist organization. Get back.
And again, a crowd of protesters, they gathered outside of the federal detention center where we're near right now. They gathered outside of that on Friday. Police and riot gear used tear gas then, again, to stop the violent protesters. ICE Acting Director Todd Lyons called the situation appalling.
So we're in a major U.S. city, and we have law enforcement officers trapped, surrounded by over 1,000 protesters. And the LAPD would not respond to help those officers in their time of need. Over 2 hours it took for them to come get there.
Well, LAPD responded to that comment saying, quote, our personnel mobilized and acted as swiftly as conditions safely allow. But as you can see, things here on the ground still pretty chaotic. I mean, you can hear those flashbangs behind me. And President Trump was very clear that more needs to be done. Sending the National Guard here. Now, California Governor Gavin Newsom claims the move, sending the National Guard, deploying them rather, was to cause a spectacle. That's what Governor Gavin Newsom called it. But President Trump says otherwise, writing on Truth Social, quote, if Governor Gavin Newsom of California and Mayor Karen Bass of Los Angeles can't do their jobs, which everyone knows they can't, then the federal government will step in and solve the problem. Riots and looters, the way it should be solved. The president also made this comment today. Take a listen.
Nobody's going to spit on our police officers. Nobody's going to spit on our military, which they do as a common thing. They get up to them this far away and then they start spitting in their face. That happens, they get hit very hard.
And also this afternoon, LAPD issued a tactical alert saying the use of less lethal munitions has been authorized by an incident commander. They said people were throwing items at officers. I witnessed that, people throwing bottles of fluid. I don't know what was in those bottles, but throwing them at officers. And LAPD saying an unlawful assembly has been declared. So that is the situation right now. You got these protesters here on the 101. You got them on the bridge. There's different points, different areas of downtown that are blocked off. You can hear those flashbangs behind me. It's unclear how long this is going to be going on. And also, I just want to reiterate, in terms of the people who were arrested during these immigration enforcement efforts, DHS, they did put out some details about this. They said, detailing about 11 of the people who were arrested, they called them the worst of the worst illegal criminal aliens. They're people from all over the world. We're talking about Ecuador, Peru, Mexico. And, those specific people, they say they have extensive criminal histories. And some of those crimes include sexual battery, abuse of a child, second-degree murder. So some serious crimes there. And those are the people that ICE agents are removing during their operations carrying out here in LA. Back to you.
Christina, it's Alicia again. A question about this group that it seems to be growing on the 101 there with their signs. It's really delicate for law enforcement when they're in this situation because we know they're trying not to agitate them further, but they're also trying to keep in mind the safety of the drivers and the public in this area. How is it that, if you can see it at all, that law enforcement is approaching these particular protesters? Are they pushing them back? How are they doing this?
No, so they're not pushing them back. They're creating a line, a skirmish line, as I believe some of my law enforcement friends call it, and they're lining up beside each other and just creating a perimeter, protecting the property, protecting themselves, and they just they move forward and they're telling the crowd to get back, and that's how they're going about it. They're not going off on any of these protesters randomly. They are protecting themselves. They're in a line. They're moving together. This is a very, very coordinated effort. You can tell. You have LAPD again, declaring an unlawful assembly. You have some of those officers providing security or providing safety measures, blocking off some of these intersections where these protesters are going. And you can see they're trying to keep traffic moving smoothly. But I can tell you, even just getting here downtown, I had to get out of the car and talk to some of the officers and say, hey, we're not here to cause any problems. We're just trying to get to the location where the National Guard is positioned to report on this very ongoing and important situation right here now in LA County. But they were so careful, and that was hours ago, that they had this area blocked off, because they're trying to do what they can. They're trying to do their best to keep everybody safe.
Christina, it's Guy Benson, and the aerial shots that we now have on the screen, you can see there. You might not be able to see them, Christina, but we can. It looks like these rioters have now blocked off 4 lanes of traffic, an entire direction of traffic in one of these major thoroughfares, one of these major arteries. So that's a huge disruption. I want to come back to something that we played in the intro to the hour in one of our montages. Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey referred to what's been going on in Los Angeles over the last couple days as, quote, peaceful protests. That's how he described them. Based on what you've seen on the ground, Christina, how would you address that characterization by Senator Booker?
I would characterize that as wrong. Throwing boulders and rocks at officers, there's nothing peaceful about that. Shoving law enforcement, attacking ICE agents, there's nothing peaceful about that. Setting fires in the middle of the road, just running around that, there's nothing peaceful about that. The vandalism, that's not peaceful. I mean, these are crimes that are being committed here, and like the Trump administration, like the officials say, the perpetrators, they're going to be held accountable. I mean, I already saw an FBI alert for a potential suspect behind assault, or who allegedly assaulted an officer. And again, this is LA. It's a big city. There's cameras everywhere. There's surveillance cameras everywhere. So even though you got a lot of protesters out here with their face covered with masks and whatnot, police are going to go through, authorities are going to go through all of this evidence. And when they go through it, they're going to be able to identify a lot of these people who are happily, tagging up vehicles and attacking law enforcement, shoving people around. They're going to go through this evidence, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens from there. But that was a very long answer to a brief question. Cory Booker's assessment of this is wrong if he's calling it peaceful.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.
but they frankly don't care.
Jonathan, it's Lydia Huth.
In the party that starts supporting ICE and supporting law enforcement, they're going to be cast aside in this party. This party's been so radical, and it's not just been recently. 2020, the anti-police wing of the party dominated, and BLM, they turned over policing to BLM in a lot of Democratic cities. But it makes sense, not for broader winning elections. It won't work there, but it will help elevate themselves. Tim Walz was, I would say politically dead, and now he's coming back by going down the Gestapo route and all these other things. And he's getting traction, and it's sad, it's pathetic, it's not in the interest of the American people in any respect, but they frankly don't care.
Jonathan, it's Lydia Hu. Thanks for your time this evening. I want to ask you about, I guess, kind of some legal questions that the Democratic governors are raising about President Trump's use of his authority to deploy the National Guard. I guess they're making a big deal about the president's use of sending federal resources over the governor's objection, saying that this is something that really the states should handle. And I just wonder, as a former federal prosecutor as well that you are, what you make of that issue, and where, does that have legs? Where could that really go? I mean, could they challenge President Trump's, use of federal resources here?
They can, but they're wrong. And it's kind of an irony to the whole thing, because they're saying that the states should handle it. And I think President Trump would be, the state should handle it, but clearly they're not. And in fact, they're supporting the rioters. But the president has, the governor has the authority, but the president also has the authority if rioters are getting in the way of the enforcement of federal law, which they are here, the immigration law. He has the absolute authority to do so. It's appropriate to do so. And I would say in this situation, it's a requirement to do so. His job is to keep these officers safe, to enforce federal law, and keep the community safe. And it's unfortunate that Gavin Newsom won't use his authority and won't use his influence, because he would rather, promote, again, this open borders agenda. And he couldn't care less about the citizens of Los Angeles or citizens of California, because the greater constituency, again, is this illegal alien pro-open border constituency. But yes, on the legal issues, President Trump is correct here. And it's unfortunate the local officials won't do their jobs.
Jonathan, bear with me here for just a second as I give just a little update, because I want to continue this conversation. We all do here. The Los Angeles Police Department Central Division, 13 minutes ago, posted the California Highway Patrol have entered the southbound lanes of the 101 freeway and are attempting to disperse the demonstrators off the freeway. Jonathan, I don't know if you can see your screen, but we are watching for any activity that comes out of that. At the same time, Governor Newsom's office sent a letter to Defense Secretary Hegseth himself, and in it they write, in dynamic and fluid situations such as the one in Los Angeles, state and local authorities are the most appropriate ones to evaluate the need for resources to safeguard life and property. Indeed, the decision to deploy the National Guard without appropriate training or orders risks seriously escalating the situation. Jonathan, all I can think about when I see some of the statements from the governor's office and the governor himself on X saying it's time for the National Guard troops to go home are the people who live in this area, the people who are trying to drive by on the 101, getting to wherever it is they want to go. And what would they think if they knew that the governor was saying, send the people who are here, sent by the president, to go home?
I would hope they'd be appalled. And what Gavin Newsom's doing is so cynical and so dishonest. Sort of this broader theme of what they're doing is like they're creating chaos and then try to blame Donald Trump for the chaos. But, he's right. The local authorities should deal with this, and they know how to deal with it. But he won't let them because of politics. If he turned it over and said, let local police deal with it and let them do their jobs, I bet they would do their jobs. But they're being prevented from doing so. But again, it's the deepest cynicism from Gavin Newsom that's so dishonest. It is breathtaking how bad it is. But, the president has a responsibility not only to ensure the federal law gets enforced, but also to protect these agents and protect the citizens. And when the state isn't going to do their job, he has to step in, unfortunately.
No, Jonathan, it strikes me that these rioters are opposed to any deportations of anyone ever, including the most dangerous illegal immigrant criminals in our society, and yet they want to stay in a country and let those criminals stay in a country that they apparently don't like very much, to put it mildly. And we're seeing law enforcement on our screen getting pelted again with objects and being screamed at. The prevalence, Jonathan, of foreign flags in this crowd, Mexican flags, Central American countries as well. It's a very interesting statement being made by these rioters as they hurl insults and objects at law enforcement, that they are doing so while carrying the banners of foreign countries where they apparently don't want to go back to.
Yeah, it's an interesting irony, and the only American flag that I saw in your clip was upside down. But it is funny, that is the standard Democratic Party position on immigration.